Welcome back to the Culture Based Podcast. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. Episode 51, July 9th, 2024, the year of our Lord.
My birthday.
Your birthday today?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Man, you know what? I saw that on my calendar this morning. Now that you mention it, I remember that. So happy birthday to you, sir. In all fairness, we're not actually recording on your birthday.
We're not.
But for those listening,
yep,
happy birthday to the Blakester. That's what I call you on the regular.
I've got nothing else.
Okay. It's a fun episode today. So I decided to wear a fun shirt and Blake decided to dress like Mr. Rogers.
Which is my favorite dress style. Like,
yes.
if you were like, hey, what are you going for? Like, what's your style? I would be like
Mr. Rogers.
Modern Mr. Rogers who walks in to any environment and owns it. Mm-hmm. That's what I want.
Yeah. And if this is your first time listening, there's going to be a lot of throwbacks in this episode. Mm-hmm. But I just want to go right up front and tell you that if you hear chickens in the background, it's because we both own chickens, but these particular ones that you're hearing are Blake's, not mine.
Oh, that's untrue.
Just kidding. Mine are right outside this window, and they love it when we record. They love it. They go nuts for it. And so that's what we're here to do today, so make them happy. But we're also here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to see the Mr. Rogers look. You also get to see the Bucky shirt, which I don't know if I've ever told the story of the Bucky shirt here on the podcast, but maybe we'll tell it today. Who knows? It's a storytelling episode. And then what else we got? Subscribe to us on audio podcast platform as well, whatever you're listening on. We appreciate you tuning in. If there's an opportunity for you to give us a follow there or rate and review, whatever it's prompting you to do, please do that. It helps us get this content out further to those like yourself who can benefit from it. Instagram, mentioned that. Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn at The Culture Base. You know what? While we're talking about it,
BASE.
BASE. It's not BASS. We're not all about that base. We're all about the other base.
Yeah. And we're not a cooking show, so it's not BASTE. Or AIST. Oh, I'm not a good speller. That was a dangerous attempt at a bad joke.
At a live spelling
joke. Bad idea.
Live spelling.
Yeah,
I love
spell checking ain't able to help me there.
This is off the rails. Theculturebase.com, BASE as well. But this is going to be a little bit of an off the rails episode. It's going to be a little bit lighter and a little bit more riffy than normal. So what we're talking about today is what we've learned and some key kind of moments from our first 50 episodes. But if you're like, it's one of those highlight episodes where they're just going to play clips from the old episodes. No, we're not going to do that. Because I don't have time to edit all that. And all the information is there for you to go back and listen to or watch. So we're going to give you some key ones that we think you should go back and listen to and watch if you missed it. But also, we're going to spend the second half or the later part of this episode talking about some exciting things, the future of the culture base. So stick around for all the reminiscing and you'll get rewarded with some of the cool stuff that we have coming up. Or if you want to skip ahead at this point, go ahead. But you're going to miss out on some cool stuff. So with that said, 50 episodes, Blake, 5-0. It's been over a year since we started this journey, and we've learned a few things along the way. Well, at least one of us has. Today we'll highlight, I'm just a mystery about which one that is. Today we're going to highlight some of our favorite moments and some of your favorite moments as well. We'll also give a sneak peek into what's next for the culture base. What do you think about this episode today, Blake?
I'm excited about it. It was kind of fun going back through because you don't remember everything you've talked about, right? Like you connect with it quickly when you get that like spark. And so it's fun to kind of go back through and look through all these episodes and be like, oh yeah, I loved this, love doing this, love talking about this. Oh yeah, that's another thing we need to bring back up. And so just talking about those things and even through all the stuff we have to come, I'm excited about today's episode.
Yeah. So I figure we would start with kind of highlighting some favorite episodes. We'll go some of our favorite episodes, and then we'll juxtapose that on how our favorite episodes didn't really match your favorite episodes of the audience, which says a lot about maybe our narcissism. I don't know. So but it's interesting. For me, if you were to ask me favorite episode of the Culture Based podcast, for me, every time it's number one is going to be episode 11, best interview questions ever. I love talking about this. It's something that when we're having conversation with our clients that they seem to get the most enjoyment out of too, because there's something special about crafting the right question in the interview, Blake, to get the answer that you're looking for, and really more of like the answer behind the answer. Right. And plus we had some really stupid questions on there, but they're really purposeful. Like, how do you eat a bag of Skittles? That was still one of my favorite. And then I know we talked about maybe even in that episode, how we used to ask like favorite office quote. And then we were like, hey, Gen Z doesn't know what we mean when we say that. I remember asking it one time, and someone thought that we meant like what's a common saying around the office environment. Like, what's the favorite thing that you hear? And I go, that's when I was like, all right, this question isn't hitting anymore.
Yeah.
But the rotation of that question, that's a living document that it's always kind of rotating around. You're always being a student of good questions to ask. Easily one of my favorites.
Yeah. And on that one, I love like what you're talking about, constantly evolving. It's never done. Don't ever see done as possible for that, because your core values of what you're focusing on and what you need to hit and where you're going to like, hey, we need for this position, we need something like this. You're going to constantly be adjusting. Even one of my favorite new questions I've already had to adjust, which one of my favorite new ones is, do you feel lucky, as a question? Yeah.
Do you? Punk.
I don't say that because again, they look at it and they're like, Office, isn't that like Bewitched? And that's like, what are you talking about? Like, but do you feel lucky? I love that question because it helps you see growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And it helps you get to real quickly if people are like, oh no, nothing ever really happens for me. And I had to change the wording of it because there are a lot of hyper Christians who are like, luck doesn't exist. And I'm like, come on, man. That's not what I'm asking. What I'm saying is, do you feel like things happen for you? Like it just happens and it works out, and like, yeah, you got to put in good work, and then yeah, God's got to do that stuff, but this is not like, let's not go down that path. So anyway, but you also get to find out people who are like way hyper on certain areas that you might not enjoy.
Yeah. What you got? Drop your first. I don't know if we're going like number one of all time necessarily. I started with my number one of all time for sure.
Yeah, I don't know that mine are in a given order. But I really like the series we just did on the scalability formula. I think that one of the hardest things for people to understand, first off, is there a process of scaling outside of just, oh, we got a great product process or, service that we can offer and it just is able to scale. Like I love being able to give direction to scalability, and then also that culture is quantifiable. I think that's like one of the big like bam in your face Batman moments where you're like, okay, we can put numbers to culture. We can put numbers to scalability, and we can see, do I have a team that's set up right for this next season of scaling, for this next type of scale? Like it doesn't even matter. Just being able to identify that and put a number to it is big.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to go for my next favorite one, was I think the only guest episode that we've had in the 50. Which again, I don't know what that says about our narcissism, but I love having guests.
I do too.
But one of my favorite guests, obviously, of all time on this podcast, because he's the only guest of all time on this podcast so far, but still, incredible just wisdom oozing out was our friend Caleb Campbell. It was just a few episodes ago, episode 47. We talked about how to quantifiably track your team culture, because as we're talking with business leaders, Blake, we're getting a lot of pushback on our culture. You're right. You can't measure that. There's no way for you to really know if you're winning or losing on it. It's frou-frou. It's, it's in the air. It's, you never really know how you're doing on it. But Caleb was able to really walk us through some extremely practical things, some of which we've started implementing ever since that episode, where we're just like, ooh, good tool. I'm stealing that. So episode 47, if you're a leader that you're just like, I don't really know how to measure all this nonsense and if it's really important or not, episode 47 with Caleb Campbell, highly recommend it.
And I've implemented and pushed into other companies already a lot of the tools he talks about. And high level, just spoiler, he talks about, we always focus on, to our customers, our net promoter score, NPS. He talks about understanding your ENPS, which would be an employee net promoter score, right? And so, like, how does that look? And so it's really good episode. Highly suggest you go back and check that one out. The next one for me would be skeptics and critics, and how it affects your organization and your culture. And, we've talked a lot about like pessimism and stuff like that, and how skeptics and critics are very different, and how there are some who focus on helping identify issues and identify problems for the betterment of your organization. And then there are other ones who, if they never bring a solution, they never bring any other thought outside of the problem, they're not your people, right? Like they're just people who are going to bring the organization down because they love highlighting negative instead of seeing how to bring about great results within your organization.
Yeah, I love the identifier episodes that we have like this, where it's like, I wonder if I have this. Here's some ways to identify it. I wonder if we're lacking in this. I wonder if we're excelling in this area. Those are always super fun to me because I'm an extremely practical person, which with the practical mindset as well, that brings me to my next favorite episode that we had, episode 26 of how to determine your culture values. I love that because it's probably one of my favorite processes and activities to go through with organizations. It's super fun for me. I love just kind of the uncovering of some of the stuff that's already organically there, how to highlight that, and watching teams kind of get excited about it and come alive around it is probably one of my favorite things. But just the practicality of how to determine your culture values was really fun for me to go through.
Yeah, that's a good like definer of certain episodes, like an identifier episode, because it's like, it's always fun to try to see where you're at in that game. And like, even, I talk about in my book as well, that if you can go up and talk about people who are like, oh, I have a great culture. And, we go, we always have like great things going on. And I always compliment our team. I always love asking someone like, hey, just go up and give someone one really good compliment and see how they respond. And like, make it authentic, but go do it. And if they're awkward, chances are you don't have the culture you think, right? Like, it could be on them, but at the same time, this might be an organizational issue. So anyway, by the way, I've been doing a poor job of telling you the episodes. The scalability formula is episode 42. I talked about skeptics and critics. That was episode 31. And then my next favorite actually is building your farm league. Okay. We talk about, in that episode, we go through like the whole MLB process to where the farm league came from through Branch Rickey, and how he created all these organizations to build up to the main organization and develop players who were, maybe had great potential, but they still had character issues that needed to be worked through, or they still had talent areas that they were still like, maybe their capacity is like 150 and they're only at 80 right now. So their capacity is great, but they would have got overlooked in the draft or something like that. And so you're constantly building people up, which is such a fun concept, because like, even thinking how many, I feel like the hardest area is from college football to NFL football. It is the hardest definer of whether someone is actually going to be good in the professional league, especially quarterbacks. I don't know what it is. You think, are they at the peak of their game in college and they're just peaking out against other people who are just not at that level? Yeah. Or do they have more capacity? And that whole idea of building a farm league dives into that and that idea.
Yeah. What I love too, a little known fact about building a farm league, which was episode 18. I don't know if you mentioned that or not, but a little known fact about building a farm league episode. That's when Blake and I, without knowing it, our families went out and bought chickens. I'm just kidding. I'm just keeping the chicken theme. They're quiet now. They're like, whatever, bro.
We've been mentioned on.
We've been mentioned. We're good. Follow us on @cluckcluck.com.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a real site. Please don't go there.
That's dangerous.
Don't do that.
That's another dangerous thing. I had a spelling joke go out there, and now we're going to throw out random URLs.
Yeah. Don't go to random URLs. Here's the URL you can go to, though. culturebase.com. Just threw that one in there for free.
Just throw it. That's good.
Anyway, my next one, because on my personal coaching side, I'm kind of gotten known as the process guy, especially when it comes to creative process. Episode 16, we called process. I love everything about that episode. I love the title of the episode. I love the conversation around the episode. Mostly because I think, again, this kind of goes back to my one of my earlier ones about when we had Caleb on, is that I think a lot of times, business leaders think that this culture stuff is all kind of ethereal and you can't really grab a hold of it. But it really all comes down to building and implementing processes and maintaining consistency and communication through those processes. That's what gets you the type of team that you want. And ultimately, like we talked about in one of our latest series of episodes, that's what gets you the scalability that you're looking for, right? That's what allows your team to scale, is these processes. And one of my favorite things to do with clients is to go through and ask the question, hey, where is this process written down at? Yeah. And they go, oh, it's all on the old ticker. Or they go, oh, it's somewhere around here, And I'm just like, okay, well, that's not going to work, because number one, if you croak, that process croaks with you. Yeah, that's right. If it's somewhere around here, meaning you don't know where it's at, no one else knows where it's at either, and they're probably not referring to it, which means you have a ton of inconsistency in your processes, and nothing can break down a culture faster like inconsistency in anything, much less your processes. It can be extremely frustrating for your team. So I really love that episode. Episode 16 is what it was.
Yeah. And with processes, like, there are such categories, and I believe we talk about it in there, but there are just categories to things that all processes must have, and they've got to be available, and they've got to be, like, I think maybe we didn't talk about it in this episode, but later on we've talked about it. And that is that no process is ever finished in the sense that it's done. Right.
Always working document.
Exactly. In one of my organizations, my director of ops, he has a reminder set that emails him to review processes, because and it's on different processes. He has different reminders. Once it's got 3 months in, he reviews it, because so much can change from time to time. And the other part of that is what generation is using your process? How do they connect to the way you're having them use the process? And so making sure that it works that way is important. So the next one for me is the cost of turnover, episode 8. I love this one because as a business owner, I know it is true that we all are ignorant of how much turnover costs us. And it's really hard to quantify how much turnover costs us, because we just end up being like, oh, what's their salary? Yeah, that's what it is, times however many weeks. And that's not it. That is like one of the categorical issues, but it is not even the main one. There are so many other multipliers that go into that. And when you don't know what the cost of turnover is costing you, you don't see it as a problem. And so you don't try to fix the main cause of the turnover. And that is what's costing you. And it's costing you scalability, not just money. It's costing you scalability because your turnover rate is indicative of so many other issues and is indicative of whether people will stay or not.
I love the word indicative.
By the way, episode 8, costs of turnover.
Ooh, an early episode. We're going way back.
Way back.
But we're not done going back. We got more on our list that's going to go back even earlier than that. For me, my next one is, or I guess the last one that I'm going to share today, is building a culture of feedback. Episode 33. One thing that I love, as much as I love processes, I really love building things kind of from the ground up, especially with an organization that's like, hey, we've never done this before. And so it's super exciting for me. I get really jacked up for that type of work. And so building a culture of feedback is fun because I kind of think of feedback as the motor oil and the engine of culture. Yep. That it's what keeps the gears turning. Like if you don't have this culture of feedback, then you really don't have a good culture at all. And really, it's just kind of seized up, right? All the communication is seized up because it's not staying lubricated with oil. I'm really into this engine metaphor right now. I hope you're with me on it. But but I love it. I think a lot of times leaders shy away from feedback because they don't want to hear the bad news, or they don't want to hear the nagging, or they don't want to hear the complaining. And not all feedback is negative. I think that's where our mind tends to go. But building a culture of feedback in general is not just about negative or criticism or critique of certain things. It's also about encouragement along the way. Hey, this really helped me when you gave me this piece of information. It really helped me. That's feedback, right? And so then oh, okay, well, I'm going to give that piece of information every time now because it's super helpful and it helps that person, helps me, helps the chickens. If you can hear them,
chickens, I can hear them.
They love the feedback. Love it. They love to hear how annoying they are during these episodes. Anyway, what's your last one, Blake, before we get into audience favorites?
Yeah, and this might be my favorite, not because it's like the best information given necessarily, but I'm an 8 on the Enneagram.
It's hot, God.
And I love like getting on things and saying things that are controversial and seeing how people react. That the episode 2, why HR isn't working. In that episode, we go into why HR shouldn't be in charge of your culture and your development. HR is great for a lot of areas. Like I'm not a hater of HR. I just think that it is far more compliance based than it is creativity based. And so much of your scalability and so much of your people development, so much of your processes, so much of all the other things that the culture base and that scalability has just aren't going to be HR. Like if I said, man, how are you going to scale your company? Where do you start? Is it HR? You would be like, no, absolutely not. That's like a hard stop on things. But when we're like, where do we put people? We're like, HR. Just throw them there. It's easier. And a lot of people don't want to deal with it, so they throw things to HR. HR is great. I love HR. I love not being sued. But it is not great for everything. Okay? It is not great for everything. So that's episode 2, why HR isn't working.
Before we get into the audience episodes, I want to just throw a couple of my favorite moments in here. We didn't talk too much about this before the show, but I have a running list of some quotes over here on the side if you're watching on YouTube that I like to pop up every now and then. They're not all like ridiculous. Only one of them is. But one thing, I don't remember who said it. It doesn't really matter who said it on this one, but on one of the shows that when we were talking, probably more recently, when we were talking about are you scalable, this quote kind of came up. Culture is the language of scalability. So if you're a leader asking yourself, why should I care about culture? This is probably number one of why you should care about culture. That culture is the language of scalability. Another great culture quote from our shows as well is that kind of defining what culture is. It's the environment that supports the fulfillment of the vision and purpose, the growth of the individual and team, and the connection and belonging within the team. That might be from your book, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. It is.
which again is uncultured, and you can buy that on Amazon. So every time you hear us spontaneously laugh when we mention uncultured, if you're only listening to it and you don't get it, it's because I have a little ticker that I can cue at any moment whenever Blake brings up the book or when I bring up the book, and it just says "Buy Uncultured" by Blake Bear on Amazon. So if you're listening and you're wondering why we're laughing every time we mention uncultured, that's why. But also, buy Uncultured by Blake Bear on Amazon today. And then my last one is favorite because we mentioned this, especially in our previous 2 episodes to this one. Like, we love a good acronym. And I remember one time when we were first starting to introduce acronyms, Blake said, "Don't worry, it's an acronym." I love this quote for a lot of reasons. Number one, why would I be worried? You know,
I didn't know I was supposed to be worried about it.
I didn't know I was supposed to be worried. Now I'm a little on edge about it. Or was I concerned that it might not be an acronym? And thank God it is an acronym.
It is.
So those are probably my favorite moments. And just in general, I would say the first few minutes of every episode is probably my favorite. Yeah. I think Blake and I, it may sound like when you tune into these that we're just like, what did I tune into? Mm-hmm. Blake and I have been friends for a long time, and we like to riff a lot. And we want you to feel like this is a conversation that you're having with us and that you're hanging out with us and we're just talking culture over beers or coffee, and or both, right? Yeah. Let's just get the full urinary experience. Coffee and beers, anyway, you know what I mean? So we just like to cut it up and just kind of make it feel loose, like you're a part of this conversation too, and you're just sitting here. So if we're talking about our chickens or Blake's outfits or my crazy Bucky shirt, there's a reason for that. And it's honestly some of my favorite moments in our episodes. Any favorite moments? We didn't prep you too much on this.
Yeah. All of them.
All of the moments. I love it.
Even the one where Jan told you we were downsizing?
Even that one. Yep. Remember that? All right. So audience favorite episodes. These are interesting. So kind of our top 4, we say audience favorites only because these are the ones with the most views. That could just be an algorithm thing, but we like to think it's because you loved it so much that you went back and watched it again, or you sent it to other people and said, hey, you should watch this. And coming in at number 1 was a Halloween episode that we did last year called Why People Quit. I remember it was Halloween, not just because of the release date, but because of the thumbnail that we created for it. Looked like looked like one of the Simpsons Halloween episodes. Yep. And that was kind of the goal. So Why People Quit, again, extremely practical, and people want to know, right, this kind of turnover deal, right? It's like, hey, why are people leaving? Why does it seem like there's a revolving door here? And so it was an eye-opening episode. It would be a discovery episode if we're talking about kind of what was the word I used earlier?
Identifier. Yeah.
So this might be a bit of an identifier, but it's probably more of a discovery episode of like that kind of, when you go, yes, that's it. That's what you yes. Do. Yes. Yes. Which Mr. Rogers says a lot to bring it back to your outfits. Yes. Another one. You want me to continue to this, or do you want to pop?
Go for it. You hit it.
Cool. Is it all me?
All on you.
Okay, great. Does team development really matter? Episode 13 was a big one. And I find it interesting that this is one of our bigger ones because this is something that I feel like we get some pushback on sometimes with leaders where they're like, okay, well, I'm paying them to do the work. So what else do I really need to do for them in order for them to stick around? And we've said often that, one of the biggest reasons that people leave a company is because there's not growth and development opportunities. Yeah. And so does team development really matter? Yeah. That's the whole episode. The answer was just us saying yes for 30 minutes or so. But yeah, it does matter. And when you give your team the opportunity to elevate themselves, not just for the sake of the company, but for the sake of you care about them as people, then yeah, of course they want to stick around. You'd stick around the same way. Oh,
yeah.
In the back, sir.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Thank you. Yes. I think with that one, the development part shows why hiring's so important too. Because so many people are like, oh, I don't want to spend the time doing all that. But if you find the right people, that actually is less of a frustration. If your turnover is lower, that's less of a frustration. So if you're just like hiring and turnover hamster wheel, then sure, don't develop, but you're just going to keep feeding the machine of high turnover.
Yep, for sure. Next favorite episode of the audience would be How to Onboard Like a Boss.
Like a boss.
Like a boss. That just means we were being sassy when we named it, but I love it. And apparently you loved it too, because it got a lot of views and a lot of shares and whatnot. So how to onboard like a boss, I think, is important, because this is the step that I think people skip, right? You're like, hey, I just need to get good quality people in here and the rest will take care of itself. But how we set them up for success determines their longevity, determines their success within the organization, determines the organization's success with them at the helm, all sorts of things like that. So how you onboard those first 90 days really kind of sets up the longevity of the whole kit and caboodle. It's been a minute since I think I've heard that phrase, kit and caboodle.
Thanks for bringing it back.
Is it kitten?
Nope.
Or is it kit and caboodle?
I'm 35% sure it's kit and caboodle.
What's a caboodle though?
I don't know. Go to www.caboodle.com.
Don't do that. That's a third time. Don't go to caboodle.com.
The fact that I threw in 3 W's shows how I am.
I have a pet peeve against people putting www in front of stuff. It's 2024, people. We know it's the World Wide Web. If you put .com at the end of something, guess what? I know it's a website. All right. Last one on our tops is pessimism, which is probably what I just did. The silent culture killer. Don't you love it? Don't you love self-discovery, Blake?
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, I love being self-aware. Pessimism, the silent culture killer. Episode 38 was a big one as well. I think probably because people, number one, here's what I think about this. Number one, I don't think people think that they're the problem. I think that they think it's the person next to them that's the problem. So that's probably why they tuned into this episode to go, how do I deal with Ted? That dude is the worst. But also, you might be silently killing your culture. And it's a disease, right? It spreads. It's like pesticides. It just kind of gets in there and gets in the roots and really kind of just starts to destroy things. So pessimism truly is the silent culture killer. And the faster you can identify it, that would be an identifier episode, right, Blake? So we've never categorized our episodes before today, but you're hearing it, like you're hearing the genesis of it right here, or you're watching it if you're tuned in. So pessimism, it truly is a silent culture killer, and in that episode we talk about how to identify that and how to wipe it out. Anything else on that episode, Blake, before we get into some other things today?
Nope.
Cool. So we're a little long already on this episode than what we'd like to be. I'll just say real quick what I've learned. I want to cover what we've learned real quick on this. One thing that I've learned more than anything else is probably that culture is more vast and wide than most of us realize. That it touches things like turnover. It touches things like scalability. It touches things like people's sense of identity and self-worth, right? It carries such weight that I don't think many leaders give the time of day to. But it's probably what I've learned in these first 50 episodes is it's probably kind of broken my heart more. For the cultures of teams and organizations that we work with. Yeah.
I think for me, it's a heavy lift. It seems like it should be easier because the word culture legitimately just means environment.
Yeah.
But controlling environment's hard, right? Like I can't control when the rain comes, but I can control things to prevent it from affecting and destroying and doing other things. And then I can also use it. I can use the rain correctly and to get it to water the right things and put things in the right place in the garden metaphor, right? So huge aspect of it is just that it is much harder than you think. And it takes study. It takes investment of your time and your effort into it. And the reason culture and indirectly scalability gets thrown to HR is because people don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with this portion of it because it seems insignificant. But the very thing that is actually going to compound your scalability is the thing that we're just pushing off to the side. Okay. It is like the cornerstone that gets ignored. It's the jewels that get forgotten. It's the crux. And I think that's why the culture base exists, because we get it, and we don't all get it to the capacity that we understand everything. In fact, I think that, we have multiple people in the organization because they have strengths in areas and they can see things in each of these environmental areas of how to help people connect to identity, community, and opportunity in different ways, and understand that if we don't do these things, here's going to be the consequence of it, right? Like if you don't take care of weeds, your other stuff will grow, but it won't grow well, right? And then you're going to have to sift through all that stuff later, and you're going to have stuff where you had a good crop that you accidentally killed because you were trying to take care of weeds later on, too late into the game. And so I think there's just a lot of benefit to having a partner in this game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're over 30 minutes in on this, and I think we've kept the people waiting long enough. Let's really get to the breaking news here of what's next for the culture base. I'm super pumped. This season of our organization is unlike any other. We've been making some massive strides with client development, including resource pages, core values assessments, 360 culture reviews, hiring, onboarding, road mapping, our 4-stage process framework, development programs, all these things that we're finally kind of getting in there and digging up and kind of mixing it up a little bit with some of our clients has been super, super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And not only in the client development side and things we've been able to go do and are continuing to do, I think also coming out here soon, and this is, I think we had a teaser last episode as well, but we're going to be having an ebook come out here shortly that is all essentially on a scalability playbook. Our resources, our ideas, our thoughts on how to get that scalability to work. And even just what you said earlier, bringing up that constant, one of those funny things we always pop up, even though it's not funny, is the culture is the language of scalability. And so it's like diving into that and implementing that. So really excited about that ebook coming out, which will be coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah, including some other free resources as well. We're working on a resources page for our website so that you can have some quick reference links. Now, this isn't necessarily all culture-based things. These are just kind of the tools that are in our tool bag that we like to go to and use. And so we're not hoarders of that information. We like to share that info with as many people as possible so that you can be growing your culture in a healthy way as well. But we also have the turnover calculator that we've been working on for a while. I think we finally got some major strides on that, and we should be getting really just honestly right now just working on trying to make sure that the report that you get afterwards makes sense to you and easy to read and navigate. Everything else is ready to roll on it. So we'll have an episode about that coming up here shortly when that rolls out. But that'll be a completely free tool for you to use and kind of plug and play, and you can change things around. It's super nerdy, but super fun. Our best interview questions ever PDF. We're gonna be popping that up on our resources page here pretty soon as well. Just a free download for you to kind of have like, hey, I need some really good interview questions. We're gonna have that for you. And then with the scalability ebook that we've got coming out, we're gonna have some online assessments that go along with that, so that you can really kind of start to understand where you fall in these things. And in that, you're going to hear a little bit about, like we did in the Are You Scalable series, you're going to hear about some of these culture types and environments and stuff like that. And so there'll be some identifiers, I think, for you to be able to figure out kind of where you fall on that scale. Anything else coming up, Blake, that you want to share?
I don't think so. The turnover calc. The one thing I'd say is we did a turnover calculator that we've been spending a ton of time on since that turnover episode that we had. And the reason we did it is because we don't trust turnover calculators. And we knew that there needs to be the ability to dive in and adjust things as needed. And that was the big why, like, because you can go find a turnover calculator right now. We wanted to dive into areas to where you could adjust it as well. So that would just be the one adder I would throw there.
Yeah, I love it. So you said our audience told us that one of their favorite episodes was, Does Team Development Really Matter? And our next episode, Blake, episode 52, we're going to be back on how to build out the right development program for your team and your culture, your organization. So cannot wait to be with you on that one. It's been a great first 50 episodes. The next 50 are going to be even better. I want to remind you, if you want to learn more about us, get the free resources, book a strategy session with us, all those things, you can go to the Culture Base.
BASE.
That's it. BASE, not based. I've never thought it was based until you said that. Now I hear it.
Yeah.
The Culture Base, BASE.com. Go there and check it out. Come back next week for more antics and to hear us talk about how to build out the right development program on the Culture Base podcast. Talk to you then.